And welcome into our very special WPIAL baseball playoff preview show here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. I'm Sean Meyers. That's Dan Flickinger. And Flick, you get to postseason baseball and it gets a little bit more intense. Every single pitch becomes magnified. And certainly we're hoping that our Westmoreland County teams do really well. But I'll say this, it is a special time of year for all these young men because when you start practicing a lot of times indoors over the winter and it's 25 degrees out, you start thinking about once you start to get to May and it heats up and we got 80-degree days, that's when baseball really starts to feel like it's very significant around here.
Yeah, by the time it actually heats up and we have good weather, we can actually get out and practice every day. You know what I mean? It's just, this spring has been so brutal, but for the teams that have gotten through it, maybe have played more games in a week than what they're accustomed to or what they thought they were going to coming into this year. Being able to get through it, get into the playoffs where anything can happen. Everybody starts out 0-0, as they say. It's a really exciting time right now, enjoying this great weather. And hey, I remember back to when I played, some of these games you get to play a little earlier in the day. Yeah. So you get out of school a little earlier too. So that's kind of exciting. You go out and get a win and come back and advance to the next round.
Now, I know you probably hated having to miss any time in school, right?
Of course, especially math. Any mathematics, I was very upset.
By the way, I don't know if your brother was the same way or not, but we're going to be hearing from John Flickinger momentarily. And you wanted me to interview him because he was probably a little concerned that you would hit him with the really hard-hitting questions. I gave him some softballs.
Like Bob, 60 minutes, actually. We would have probably called it if I sat down and talked with him. So I thought you go up with your softballs, and that way you won't be mad at me.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of the 6 Westmoreland County coaches that we're going to hear from on this very special playoff show. We've got a couple in 6A. We'll run down the brackets for each classification. We're going to hear from Tim Buzzard, the very successful coach of Hempfield area. A coach that's won a WPIAL title, Mike Lebdezinski for Norwin. In 5A, we're going to hear from Dan Miller. He knows what it takes to get to a championship game, guiding Penn Trafford. And Matt Basiano, another championship-winning coach for Greater Latrobe, and a terrific season for the Wildcats as they won a section title. The aforementioned John Flickinger, coming off of maybe the best season in Dairy area baseball history, as his team's back in the postseason. Once again, we'll hear from him in a 3A bracket. And who am I missing here, Flick? I got too many. Oh, Craig Spizak.
Craig Spizak from the York Cougars. Yes, sir.
The York Cougars. Another good season for York. So excited to hear from all 6 of those head coaches. And again, we're going to run it down. We have 10 Westmoreland County teams that are postseason bound. Weather permitting, things are going to get underway this week. And one thing that we should note, by the way, because this was a big deal when they made the change, they've set up the playoff bracket so that in theory, if everything goes according to plan with the schedule, you cannot ride that ace all the way. It's going to test the depth of these teams. They're going to play twice in the same week, whether it be the first round of the quarters or the quarters and the semis. However it is, it will be a true team effort to get to the playoffs and to make a deep postseason run to a championship.
And of course, the 100 pitch count goes up a little bit to 105 pitches. Yep. And that could be a big deal. It's always interesting thinking about how coaches would handle the pitch count when it came into play, in terms of from an offensive even perspective. If you're putting the ball in play, if you're fouling off a lot of pitches, that type of thing, you can get to a pitcher, maybe knock him out of the game. If your pitcher's pitching well, maybe it's 0-0 or you're up or down 1-0. It's a close game, and then you can get into the bullpen. So I think it's been great. Certainly, that's something that is definitely needed. Take it out of the coach's hands. Keep our young men healthy. But also, it's been interesting to see how teams handle the strategy behind it.
Absolutely. And it's always intriguing with baseball, again, because it's not just one pitcher. You have to have some depth.
That's right.
So I think that's something that these coaches that they know they're headed to playoffs, they have to make sure that they have not just one arm or 2 arms, probably 3 or 4. It's a rarity. I think Franklin Regional last year, they basically just had 2 guys that carried them to a championship. Usually does not work out like that. So some real depth will be needed to make a deep run. Let's begin in the 6A bracket, the largest of the 6 classifications. And we will go with the left side of the bracket first. And that begins with the number 1 seed in the classification, the Mount Lebanon Blue Devils, as they earn a bye to the quarterfinals. So their first game, they're going to have to wait a little while. It will be on Monday, May 23rd. They will face either number 8 Seneca Valley or number 9 Hempfield area. As we mentioned, we're going to hear from Coach Buzzard momentarily. That first round matchup will take place on Wednesday, 5 o'clock at Plum High School. On that same side of the bracket, a couple of other teams earned byes to the quarters. That's number 4 Norwin. We'll hear from Michael Ebnezinski, their head man. The Knights will go against number 5 Pittsburgh Central Catholic. Again, that will take place in the quarterfinals to be played on Monday. No time or location yet for any of the quarterfinals matchups. On the other side, number 2 seed goes to North Allegheny. The defending champion Tigers get a bye. They will face number 7 Upper St. Clair. That will take place on the 23rd, as will number 3 Pine Richland against number 6 Butler. So you look at it, it is a small field. There are just 9 teams in this bracket. So there's really only one first round game. It's Seneca Valley against Hempfield area. And I think you look at the Spartans and Coach Buzzard, he has a knack for getting the most out of his team in the postseason. I think they surprised some people last year going to the championship game. Yeah, they came up short, but that should only pay dividends for what's, I think, a pretty talented team here once again in 2022.
Yeah, and again, when you look at Hempfield this year, it's a team that doesn't have a great record. I don't know the last time they had a losing record. I mean, they have obviously had tremendous success under Tim Buzzard, but I think it's a team that has lost a lot of close games this year. You look back and a non-section loss to Penn Trafford 2-1. They lost Upper St. Clair by 2 runs, to Latrobe non-section play by 1. They lost to Mount Lebanon by a run, Baldwin by 2 runs. So Norwin by 1 run, and then they lost 15-8 in the other game, and they were actually up 6 or 7-0 in that game. So it's a team that I think you get into the playoffs, everything kind of starts over, you can reset, but you also have that belief that, even though losses are losses, I get it. You got to find ways to win those games, that you were at least in those, the majority of the section games this year. And I think that they do have good players. So I think that, they definitely have a chance, I think, to make a run at it. Who knows? As we've talked about on I think past broadcasts before, the Norwin Knights, the year they won the WPIAL championship recently was the year they came in flying under the radar. They weren't one of the favorites. So, with guys like Fedor and Kramer and Zadroga and Coughlin, I mean, those guys can kind of lead the way for Hempfield, I think.
Yeah, and to that point, not just some really good players, but guys who have already made college commitments that are going to be playing at a high level. Joe Fedor's going to Seton Hill. Brandon Coughlin, he's just outstanding, headed to Lehigh. And you mentioned a couple of the pitchers. Kramer headed to Cal U, Zadroga, Pitt, Johnstown. So certainly the talent is there. And we've seen sort of Hempfield area. Sometimes they've been one of the top seeds. It hasn't worked out. Last year, they were able to kind of stun some teams, including Norwin, to make it to a championship. And getting to that title game, I think that, that should pay dividends. So we'll see how the Spartans fare ultimately. But one thing that they always have on their side, they have a really good head coach, Tim Buzzard, one of my favorite guys to talk to. You had the opportunity to talk to Coach Buzz. Let's now hear from the longtime head coach, Tim Buzzard of Hempfield area.
Now being joined by Hempfield head coach Tim Buzzard as his team gets set to take on the Seneca Valley Raiders. Hempfield, the number 9 seed, Seneca Valley, the number 8 seed, playing on Wednesday at Plum at 5 o'clock. Coach, always good to talk with you. Congratulations on getting the playoffs. I know the regular season maybe didn't go exactly the way that you wanted it to, but you're here, you're dancing, and you have to feel like your team has just as good of a shot as anyone in the field.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to qualify. We definitely have had some ups and downs this year. We are what the record indicates. We haven't played very well, but at times we've also played some pretty good games. But yeah, at this point, 6A, everyone's good. The number one goal is to qualify and give yourself a chance. We did that. Still have a whole lot of belief in our kids, and can't wait to see how we perform on Wednesday.
And I know, as you mentioned, your record says what you are right now, but I don't know that tells the whole story about your team this year. You've lost a ton of close games. You've had leads in other ones and unfortunately squandered those leads late. But I mean, even though those games turn into losses, Tim, does that give your kids at least confidence that they know that they can play with anyone?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would have to look the numbers, but I mean, I'm going to guess it's something. We probably have what, 8 or 9. I mean, probably 8 lost at least by a run or two. Most of them have been lost in the actual 7th inning. I mean, you could look at it both ways. You can say, oh, the team's not playing well enough and we're finding ways to lose, or you can say maybe the ball just hasn't bounced well. I mean, it's just whatever way you want to look at it. As far as we go, yeah, I think we're prepared. We've played a ton of good teams. We always have a really good schedule, and we've done the same thing this year. And we definitely have lost a couple interesting ways, no doubt. And again, I still have a lot of hope that our kids are tough enough, and in those positions they can, find a way to get it done, and hopefully we get on the other end of it here at the right time.
As you have a chance to, I guess, reflect since the regular season at least is over, what ultimately has been the difference, would you say, in those close games that you haven't really pulled out?
It's funny because it's kind of been a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some games where earlier in the year we were not swinging as well as we probably were capable of, and lost some games close that we look back after and said, man, if we were just, if we were hitting as well as we normally are hitting, we could have, had a few more wins. And then as it went along, our bats got pretty hot, and we were swinging really well in the middle of the season, even through the end. And at that point, then, defensively, we botched some plays that we normally don't do. And then, one game we walk guys. It's seriously been a little bit of everything and something different. We just haven't played too many games where all 3 phases clicked. I still think it would be scary if we did. And I think we have the ability to do that. We have the kids to do that. Just need to find a way. Again, single elimination is tough. The playoffs, we know how it goes. Every year is different. Last year we were fortunate enough to make a nice little run, and because we were playing good baseball at the right time, we're hoping the same thing happens at this point. Everything in the past is done. I think it's out of our kids' minds, out of our coaches' minds. We're just ready to get in the tournament and see how we do.
Well, several players have certainly been consistent for you, Coach, at the plate. Joe Fedor, Noah Zadroga, and also Brandon Coughlin. They've really put up some nice numbers this year. What have you kind of seen from those guys that excites you coming into the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, just seniors stepping their game up and taking it to another level. Joe, really at the beginning of the year, carried us for the first number of games when we were kind of, like I said, offensively. The first 5, 6, 7 games weren't really swinging as well as we were capable. He did a really nice job. And Noah too, really, at that point in the middle got really, really hot. And then Brandon's been pretty consistent for the most part. All 3 of them are very good hitters, talented seniors, kids that'll play baseball at the next level. It's been good to see them put years together and put up some numbers. Definitely a big part of the middle of our order, and one of the reasons why we've scored some runs here, especially in the second half.
And certainly on the mound, Jake Kramer's been leading the group, a guy that will be going on to play collegiatgoing as well. What do you kind of expect now from him as you enter the playoffs?
I mean, you just know what you're always going to get out of him. I mean, he's a bulldog. He's going to compete every single time out. The kids behind him really believe in him. Our team does. He just always battles and always, seems to give you a quality start. He's going to be aggressive, and he doesn't back down from anyone. And, he has 3 good pitches, and you hope that he has a day. I know the kids behind him, will be really, really enjoy playing behind him when he's pitching. He's kind of our ace and our leader out there. So I know it's always a good feeling when he gets the ball.
And we talked about some of the big names there, but can you identify, Coach, maybe a guy or two that, came into the season maybe not knowing what his role would be or how often he'd play, that type of thing, but has really improved, I guess, throughout the season and kind of jumped off the page for you?
Yeah, we've had a couple of those guys. This year was, on paper, we had coming back, we had a lot of guys. Obviously, we lost some big seniors last year, but we also had 6 or 7 guys we felt pretty good about coming back, and they've all contributed and had their years. Gage Wheaton got hurt in the first game of the year, really talented player for us, and it was a really big blow to our team. But we've had a couple of guys then that have come in and kind of helped out and helped steer the ship and kind of pick up the slack. Logan Hilland is a guy. It's a junior who's really contributed as an outfielder. He's done a great job defensively, and he's swung the bat well. It points to our catching position. We had 2 sophomores. We lost Luke last year. Carson Shugley got some time last year. in the playoffs because Luka
Mm-hmm.
broke a bone in his hand, and he did well then. And we've had him and Caden Biondi, both sophomores, have done a really, really nice job for us to keep that position where it is. Adam Hess has come on lately, really talented hitter. We knew that going in, had an injury at the beginning, got healed, started a little slow. Now he's really, really hitting for us. And another guy's been Conor Berkey on the mound, has pitched really well. He's stepped up a lot of those non-section games, has given us some really quality innings, throws a ton of strikes, and has taken a jump. He's a junior as well. So those would be some of our unsung guys that have gotten opportunities in there. A couple other guys too I know I'm missing, but we've had in and out. Dylan Firmstone, a freshman's got some time. Colin Hunter came on later in the year as a junior. So we had a bunch of guys that definitely have picked up the slack and helped out, especially you have a couple injuries, you have a couple guys go down in and out. It really has helped kind of, in those spots.
And you mentioned that obviously you guys played for WPIAL championship last year. How much will this team rely on the guys that were a part of that team last year to kind of, settle maybe everything down in a playoff game?
Yeah, you would hope that the experience from last year, and again, we had in the title game itself, we probably had 5 of these kids playing, I would think, if I think back.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hope that experience and the run that they made into the state playoffs, the moment's not too big when we step on the field. And I think everyone knows kind of the adrenaline, the different feel when it's a playoff game, especially in these do or dies with baseball. It's a lot of fun, but you really have to try to control your emotions. I think we have guys that can do that and hopefully lead the way for some of the guys that are getting their first taste of it.
As we continue to have less and less teams in Class 6A in all sports, what are your thoughts overall here looking at the bracket, Tim?
Well, it's just, 6A is really, you have so many good teams. There's not many teams, but they're all really strong programs. Anyone's capable of winning any year. Last year we had a great year, but you look at it as, we were a home run away. The Central Catholic came the first round. It came down to, we hit a home run late in a really tight game. That could have been the end right there. The second game, you beat Norwin, and to get to the finals. North Allegheny was there. The same thing goes to this year. You have Mount Lebanon had such a great year. Really strong team. North Allegheny, Pine Richland shared their section. It goes on and on. Butler, Seneca. We're playing Seneca Valley in, I guess, what you would call the first round, or some are calling the play-in game. I think, they have as good a chance as anyone, too. It's just there's no breaks in 6A. Every team's tough. It's awesome. It makes it so much more competitive. I love it. I wouldn't want it a different way. Really makes it easy to get up for the games for the kids and the coaches. Love it. I absolutely love it. I wish there was more. It is a little disappointing as you look forward and start to see the teams dwindle away, and you start to lose some of these good teams that go to 5A as well, that are in the same area as you with similar numbers, but they're not playing the same class. It's disappointing. A couple years ago, when we had 18 or 19, it made it for a little bit better, but nothing you can control there. I'm just glad we're playing in the highest level of competition. I think that makes it the most fun. I know from my end, that's, I really enjoy it.
Before I ask you about Seneca Valley, Coach, I wanted to get your thoughts. I hadn't had a chance to ask you about your thoughts on the 3-game series. I think it's official, correct? Going to next year in the WPIAL. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing. I actually really like it. It's going to be hard with weather. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's very
spring
true.
Like we did this year. Some teams that don't have turf. That's going to be the one hard part. Is going to be you could have one series where both teams have turf, another series where they don't, and then those games are getting backed up, which makes it a really unfair advantage, or not unfair, but whatever you want to call that, a disadvantage for the team that didn't get their games in for the week. On paper, if you have a good spring, I absolutely love it because 3 games really determines who had the better series, I think, and it makes you use a lot of pitchers. I know we try to develop a lot of guys, and you're not always going to have your top guys. Some year you might have a better ace or a better 2 or whatever else, but it's nice to have that. I like from a strategy standpoint, a competition standpoint, that to mix guys in and out, use all your players. That's it's definitely, in my opinion, a really strong, really good thing.
And finally, Tim, what are your thoughts on Seneca Valley? I know you just said, hey, they have as good of a chance as anyone, just like I believe you guys do, to really make a run here. So what do you kind of look at when you look at the Raiders?
Well, we scrimmaged them at the beginning of the year, and it's hard to ever tell there. That was our first time outside, whatever it is. But, I mean, you can always see they're well coached. They have talent. They've been, perennial power for years. And for this year's no different. They have a really good number one pitcher. We saw him for an inning. He's had a really good year for them in section play. Definitely had a couple hitters, too, that were talented. Their pitching depth stood out to me. Just a top team, plays, just like us in the good section. They have some big wins. Definitely capable of beating anyone. So, we got to play our absolute best game. We know that going in.
Coach, as always, thank you so much for your time. Go Spartans, make a run, and good luck, all right?
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Coach Buzzard, for taking the time to talk to Flick. I had an opportunity to talk to a 6A coach as well. We kind of split things up. I talked to Mike Lebdezinski with the Norwin Knights, and I'll tell you, last year, no surprise, it's no secret, I should say, Flick, I think there was some disappointment, right? Because talent-wise, I think they were probably the top team. Didn't make it to a championship game. Unfortunately, with the way that it turned out, losing in the semifinals, their season was over. So it's the same thing this year. Only the two championship participants have a chance at the States. I think that this is going to be a motivated Norwin team. Some of those kids who are back, like Jacob Kendro, as good of a player as there is at shortstop, he's going to be really motivated. And I think maybe it'll be better for Norwin coming in a little under the radar as the number 4 seed, as opposed to last year when everyone was expecting that they would go on to the championship.
Well, yeah, and you know how important it is to have that momentum coming into the playoffs. Norwin finishing the season winning 6 of its last 8 games, including 2 big games over Hempfield. And really coming into that Hempfield series, if they get swept and Cannon McMillan sweeps Mount Lebanon, now, of course, actually, I think the opposite happened in both double headers there, not double headers, but both section series. Obviously, Norwin ended up beating Hempfield twice. Mount Lebanon ended up beating Cannon Mac twice. But the point is, Norwin went into that series with the possibility of them not making the playoffs, but they did what they needed to do. They didn't worry about getting help from Mount Lebanon or anything like that. They beat Hempfield twice, and now they can kind of use that to kind of springboard them into the playoffs. But at some point, or at one point, I should say, when they were playing Cannon McMillan and they got swept by the Big Macs, at that point of the year, it was like, man, Norwin, they might miss the postseason, but give them credit. They were able to regroup and win 6 of their last 8 games to get into the postseason. And I think just like Hempfield, Sean, I know that the old cliche goes, you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. But, I think it's true with Norwin and Hempfield because of the programs. They've been there and done that before. These kids have played in playoff games in the past. They played in big games in the past. So I think that I do think that they can make some noise.
And for me, I saw Norwin a couple of times this year, and I think luckily I was not at the first game of the season because it was bitterly cold. They gave up, I think, 15 or 16 walks in a loss against Penn Trafford. If they throw strikes and they get even decent pitching, I think that they can make a run. They can't afford to have a game where they don't throw strikes, but I think if they get that squared away, which did improve as the season goes along, offensively and defensively, I think they can match just about anyone.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the pitching has been inconsistent this year for Norwin. They've had some really good outings, and they also
have some good arms.
Some pretty poor outings. Exactly. Yeah, and they have the talent there. They just need to do it consistently, and I think that's been an issue. But again, those guys get hot. They start feeling that confidence. I think that Norwin can surprise some people in the playoffs. One guy to keep an eye on, Sebastian Rosado out of the bullpen. Maybe he'll start a game. Who knows, depending on how long Norwin goes. But I saw him pitch a couple of times this year, and he pitched very well. So they do have the talent, certainly, but can they do it on a consistent level?
Yeah, and so you're talking a guy coming maybe out of the bullpen who's an IUP commit. And he's got a couple other pitchers, Jake Owenowitz, Gannon, Noah Tchaikovsky, St. Bonaventure. So they have the talent. It just comes down to executing and maybe living up to that lofty standard that they have set over the years. Remember, 2016, Norwin did kind of surprise some people en route to a championship. I will never forget that game. I did the broadcast.
Okay.
They handed Plum, my alma mater, their first loss of the season. The Mustangs were trying to have a historic campaign, and the Knights spoiled it. So they maybe have a chance to spoil some things again this year. the guy who's a common theme between that 2016 team and the current team, it's their head coach, Mike Lebdezinski. He's been there for almost 20 years. I had the opportunity to talk to the coach. Let's now hear from Norwin's Mike Lebdezinski. Coach, first off, congratulations. Another postseason appearance for Norwin. Seems like year in and year out, always playing some extra baseball. Talk a little bit about how this season unfolded, because I know expectations are high once again, maybe a little bit of a slower start, but a pretty strong finish to the regular season. What did you see in terms of start to finish to growth?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. It's good to be back in the playoffs, and that's obviously one of our goals every year, and we've been pretty successful at making it. The season's been kind of disjointed. We've had good pitching at times, good hitting at times, good fielding at times, but never really put everything together. So, our expectations were maybe a little higher than where we finished, but you get in the playoffs and you have a chance for there. Everybody has a clean slate, and we'll take a shot at it.
I know you said at times you didn't play complete baseball. It seemed like early in the season there were some issues with the pitching, in particular a lot of walks. And I know you don't have to go back any further than the first game of the season to see that. Is that something that you've seen maybe improvement upon? And how, as a coach, is that something that you can try to address?
Yeah, again, beginning of the year, definitely that was an issue. I think overall we found some spots for guys and they fit in better, maybe in different roles than maybe at the beginning of the season that we had. We, down the stretch, haven't walked nearly as many. So certainly that's something that's been shored up a little bit, and hopefully that'll continue in the playoffs.
You look at some of the teams across the WPIAL, they're lucky to have one or two college-bound players on their roster. You have more than half a dozen. Do you notice, do those guys maybe bring out the best in each other, knowing that they're all moving on to the next level and really probably competitive guys who are trying to continue to hone their skills every single day?
Yeah, it's a good group of kids. They work really hard, and they're good friends. And so, I think they push each other to do well. They push each other so that the team is successful, and it's been fun working with these guys.
I know last year, most teams would be very happy to have 14 wins and an appearance in the semifinals, but it did feel like it was a little bit of a letdown for the team that you had. What did the players who were back this year maybe learn from that experience?
Yeah, that was a little disappointing last year. Again, we had, a lot of college guys again, and we thought maybe we had a chance to go a little bit further than the semis either. But it doesn't work out that way. Baseball's a challenging game. It doesn't always work out how you think it's going to. The guys this year have talked about it for sure. They don't want to go out early this year. They know it's their last chance. So, guys like Kendro and Waylon and Stecco that were a big part of the team last year are certainly pushing to do as well as we can here.
You talk about Jacob Kendro. Man, he is incredible to watch, especially defensively. I know he's put up some really good offensive numbers, but I believe you said he's maybe as good of a shortstop as you've seen. When you think about him, what makes him so elite?
He's just extremely athletic. He has all the baseball skill as well, but his athleticism allows him to do things maybe that some of our other guys at short haven't been able to do. And we've had some excellent shortstops in the past for sure, but not the range and the ability to do things that he can do with his athletic ability.
So you're in a kind of an interesting scenario, and we'll get to the bracket momentarily, but in 6A, for most teams, there's a little bit longer of a wait before you actually begin your playoffs. You had, I think, 3 non-section games to wrap up the regular season. So you're looking at probably 2+ weeks in between your last section game and when you begin the postseason. How do you try to prepare? How do you make sure that the team stays sharp during that time?
Yeah, so we started off this week by giving them 3 days off. So they had their prom Friday, so we thought it was a good chance to just get away. We're 12 days in between real baseball games, and that's a lot. And we just thought mentally that, that's a strain going out there practicing every day without a game to play. So we have a scrimmage lined up for Tuesday. So we'll try to get back into things tomorrow, and then Tuesday try to get them focused in terms of it's a scrimmage, but we got to treat it like a real game because it's going to be so long since we played an actual game. I think it is mentally challenging. Our kids, they're 17, 18 years old, and maybe hard to keep focused that long. At this point of the year, they just want to play, and it's a challenge to wait as long as we have to wait.
We look at all the baseball, all the softball brackets, and sometimes you have 16+ teams in a field. That's not the case in 6A baseball. There's 9 teams total, which means that your team and many of them do get that bye technically to the quarterfinals. So you get the number 4 seed. You're going against the number 5 seed in Pittsburgh Central Catholic. How did that bracket sort of align with what you maybe had anticipated going in?
We really thought we were going to end up playing Pittsburgh Central Catholic. So in terms of where we were and where they were, we had that one right. We pretty much saw it. There was maybe one difference of what we had on our mock bracket compared to what actually turned out to be, but we had it pretty close. And at this point, really, I think with the teams that there are in 6A, the seeding doesn't really matter too much. Everybody has a talented pitcher or two that you're going to have to face. Everybody has good lineups. So, for me, the seeding not really that important since we've gone to 6A.
Now, you actually played Central Catholic earlier this season, correct?
Correct.
So how much do you go back and look at that game, knowing that, the teams have probably changed quite a bit since I think that was the last day of March when you played?
Yeah, we'll certainly use it. We keep track of everything in terms of game and scouting each of the players and some tendencies of theirs. Certainly we'll use that. But we also realized that, it was a non-section game early in the year and their lineup's certainly different. We understand we didn't see their maybe 1 or 2 pitchers that game. So, we're going to see some different guys on the mound for them, and who knows if their lineup's exactly the same. But we'll take and use as much information as possibly can to give us whatever advantage we can get.
What do you see from them in terms of their strengths?
Well, I hear this pitcher of theirs is extremely talented. Otherwise, their lineup was solid against us. Ryan and Ross had an outstanding game against them, but I still really like their lineup. And like I said, when you're in 6A, everybody's going to have someone good at the top of their rotation, and everybody's going to have a solid lineup. So, we'll go out and do the best we can, and hopefully things work out for the best for us.
You've been guiding this program for nearly 20 years, and I think you've seen a lot of different perspectives because the time you won the WPIAL championship, it was sort of an under the radar regular season. You've also gone into the playoffs as favorites a couple of times. So you're sort of in between there with the number 4 seed. In your experience, what do you think is the easiest as a coach in terms of heading into the playoffs? Do you want to be that top team, or do you like being a little bit maybe under the radar?
You know what? There were times when I wanted to be the top seed. I thought we were, the most talented team, and I think we deserved to be at the top. There's other times where I thought we deserved to be down where we were. So again, we approach things a little bit differently in terms of that. But I think for the kids, it's easier not being at the top. Kind of that mentality. There's nothing to lose. Hey, we're the 11 seed. We're the 14 seed back in the day. You know what? We're not supposed to do that well, so we can just go out and play free and easy. So kind of being in the middle here, I think these kids do have a lot of expectations. They think, we're the 4 seed, but we have a good chance to win it. And so hopefully they don't put too much pressure on themselves, and they can. We stress the idea that, you know how to play the game, relax and do what you're capable of. Don't try to do more than you're capable of, and you'll be fine. So we'll try to prep them mentally in that way, and hopefully they respond.
Lastly, you know what it takes to make successful postseason runs. You've had many of them, including that 2016 team that went on to win the title. What are the biggest keys this year to make another run?
Well, just like those years, the key is pitching. Every time we've made a run, our pitchers have done extremely well. Going back the whole way to 2006, we had 2 Division I pitchers, and we made a run to the championship game, unfortunately losing. The 2 other times we made the finals, our pitchers, even though we didn't have any D1 guys on the mound, they threw 3 consecutive shutouts. So it's pitching certainly has been a key. It was a key in the WPIAL championship year. It's going to be a key again this year. And like I said, everybody has a good one at the top. So whoever can be the strongest on the mound, I think is going to be there at the end.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations. We look forward to more success over the next couple of weeks, hopefully for the Knights.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right. Mike Lebezinski, head coach for Norwin Baseball. And we thank Coach Mike Lebezinski for taking the time. One final note on 6A before we move on to the 5A bracket. I mentioned, but it's worth repeating, just 2 teams move on to the state playoffs. So if you do not get to a championship game, your season will end, unfortunately. And the championships will be back at the familiar Wild Things Park in Washington, Pennsylvania. They're not sure exactly when the games are going to be played. It'll either be May 31st or June 1st. That's still yet to be determined for all 6 classifications, but it will be one of those 2 days, weather permitting, at Wild Things Park.
And Sean, that's interesting because a couple of years ago, if you remember, Hempfield and Norwin played in the state playoffs. I think maybe the year Norwin won the WPIAL championship we were just talking about, and Hempfield beat them in the state playoffs. So it's interesting, though, with a smaller amount of teams in the 6A bracket, only 2 will make it to the states.
Yep, absolutely. Let's now drop down to the 5A classification, and well represented in terms of Westmoreland County. We're going to have a couple of interviews upcoming here as well. We'll begin with the number 1 seed Peters Township. Well, who are the Indians facing? I don't know how we're going to do this, but whatever. I'll just skip it. They're playing on Monday. It's a pigtail game on Monday.
Oh.
No one really cares, right? I mean, it's McKeesport and Connellsville.
So. You could just say they played Monday, or maybe just don't even mention it. Or then we don't know who's going to play.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'll just say Peters Township against either Connellsville or McKeesport, and just not say that they played on Monday.
Yeah, no one will probably pay attention.
I didn't realize that, so okay. All right. Whatever. So we'll drop down now to the 5A classification, well represented for Westmoreland County. And we're going to hear from a couple of the head coaches, with Dan Miller of Penn Trafford, Matt Basiano for Greater Latrobe. But we'll begin with the number 1 seed, Peters Township Indians, as they will go against either number 16 Connellsville or number 17 McKeesport. Winner of that one moves on to Thursday and in the quarterfinals. All of the first round games, by the way, taking place today. So weather permitting, we'll get all of those games in, and then we will move on from there. So Peters Township against either Connellsville or McKeesport. And the winner of that one will face either number 8 Penn Trafford or number 9 Hampton. Those teams locking up today at West Mifflin, 4:30 start time. Again, weather permitting for all of the games that we're talking about. Also on that side of the bracket, number 4 Mars area goes against number 13 Chartiers Valley. That'll take place at North Allegheny High School. And number 5 Greater Latrobe will go against number 12 Thomas Jefferson. It will not be a long track for the Wildcats. They will play close to home, as they will have Hempfield area as the venue for that first round matchup. On the other side of the bracket, number 2 Bethel Park against number 15 Gateway. That'll take place today at Burkett Park. Also number 7 South Fayette and number 10 Franklin Regional. That'll also be at Burkett Park. That will be a nightcap at 7 o'clock, first pitch. Also taking place at Burkett Park, of part of the triple header today, number 3 West Allegheny and number 14 Fox Chapel. The winner of that one moves on to face either number 6 Shaler area or number 11 Plum. That will take place at North Allegheny. So we look at 5A. The defending champion Franklin Regional Panthers are in the field. They're a team that's maybe trending in the right direction. Penn Trafford, a team that's played for a championship in recent years, they're maybe starting to trend in the right direction. And yet the best seed of the group, Greater Latrobe, which won the section, you could say, I don't want to necessarily say backing their way into the playoffs, but maybe not quite as much momentum as a couple of weeks ago for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Latrobe, they had a great start to the season. Obviously, they finished as a section champion, so that's the bottom line. But, you lose the last 2 section games to Penn Trafford, 10-6 and 4-3. And, you lose to Butler, I guess, the final regular season game of the year. Maybe you do kind of feel that, maybe you're not necessarily at your best right now, but I think that can come back pretty quickly. You get into that game 1 against Thomas Jefferson. You're playing at a familiar place at Hempfield. And when Latrobe won their state and WPIAL championships a couple of years ago, they actually started out at Hempfield in that run. So they're at a familiar place, certainly at Hempfield, playing there against TJ later today. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how Latrobe can kind of shrug off what they did against Penn Trafford, because you look at the other section series they played before PT, they really hammered Kiski in pretty impressive fashion. They beat some teams pretty impressively this year. Gateway by multiple runs, 8-2 and 7-3. McKeesport 11-3 and 8-0. I know that maybe the Tigers aren't the toast of the section or anything like that, but they did what they had to do against them.
Yeah, McKeesport is
a playoff team, right? So. Yeah, so they did what they had to do against them. So I don't know. Those are some tough losses to Penn Trafford, but 4 runs and 1 run. I don't know. I think PT is a good team too. So it'll be interesting to see if Latrobe can maybe regroup a little bit and go at it.
And speaking of Greater Latrobe, we mentioned they have that championship pedigree. Never forget that 2017 season. I believe you and I both were up at Penn State when they won that title. And of course, we mentioned they won the WPIAL title that year. By the way, who was one of their top players then? It was one Jared Kolar. If you haven't checked it out yet, Westmoreland alum Q&A with Jared Kolar recently, who's now at Rutgers after a terrific run at Seton Hill. I'm sure Matt Basiano wishes he had Kolar still to send out there for the playoff matchup. Unfortunately, he doesn't. But again, this is a team that they won a playoff game a little surprisingly. Last year, they defeated a Plum team that was clearly a favorite. So there is something about having that tradition of winning in the postseason, and Matt Basiano has certainly had that throughout his terrific career guiding Greater Latrobe. Let's now hear from the head man for the Wildcats. Here's Matt Basiano.
Being joined by Greater Latrobe baseball coach Matt Basiano, who is in his 19th year, 18th season as the head coach at Latrobe, and also won his 200th career game earlier this year. So, Coach, congratulations on that. Congratulations on getting to the playoffs. Congrats on winning a section title. You guys have had a great season, and I know you're excited to get ready to roll here in the postseason.
Thanks, Flick. Yeah, it's been a long wait here. It seems like every day kids get a little bit more anxious, as we do too. So we're ready to get going here tomorrow.
When you look at how the seeding broke down, I'll ask you about the bracket a little bit later, but you guys won the section title pretty early in the season. As you mentioned, you're kind of waiting to, get through these non-section games and finally get to the playoffs. But as the seeding was announced, you guys get the number 5 seed and play Thomas Jefferson at Hempfield. Was that kind of the seed that you were expecting, or higher, lower? What kind of were you thinking going in?
Yeah, honestly, and maybe I start looking at it a little too soon, drive myself nuts. But every time I looked at it and drew up the brackets, I had us as a 5. I truly think that's where we are. I think they got it right, and we're happy with it. We just want to be in the playoffs and start this new season.
Last year, you guys had kind of a young team coach that really got hot down the stretch. You knocked off Plum in the first round of the playoffs, and you lost to a really good Peters Township team by just 4 runs in the quarterfinal. What does your team need to do this year, I guess, to get hot again, the beginning of the playoffs, and maybe make a deeper run with some more experience?
Hey, it's a very similar team that last year pitching was all new. This year, pretty much the same. We had the kids on the team last year, but as far as experience, they didn't have much on the mound, but they really stepped it up this year. So we're looking to rely on that pitching, some solid defense, and come up with some quality at bats. Like you had said, wrapping up the section and then these exhibition games here at the end, using them as a tune-up. And we went up to Butler, and we were real happy with the way the kids played these last couple games. So we're anxious. We're ready to get going here tomorrow.
Well, and you mentioned the games that you played to end the season. I know maybe you didn't end the season the way you wanted it to in terms of wins and losses, a couple of losses to Penn Trafford, but you played so well at the beginning of the year, got those wins that you're able to clinch a section title. But you played some good teams too, Coach, as you mentioned at the end of the year. PT is a really good team. North Catholic is a good team. Butler is a good team. So is there any concern on your end coming into the playoffs with a couple of losses, or are you happy with the way you're playing? And then maybe the ball just didn't go your way in a couple of those games.
They were tough teams. Like you said, Penn Trafford, great team within the section, and those out of section games. I think that all says a lot of maybe not winning them, but how you played them and fighting and battling till the end. That's what we want to see from the kids. They have that heart, that fight, and they're not going to quit. They're not going to give up. Because really, that's what the playoffs are all about. Every team you face is going to be a quality team, and you have to have that mentality to go out there and have no quit.
And when you look at your opponents this year, you played against some good teams. How does that get you ready for playoff games? I mean, even your section, you mentioned Penn Trafford, Franklin Regional is a good team. Gateway's solid. I know you took care of McKeesport in a couple of games, but they're always a competitive team. So how do those games get you ready for the postseason?
We talked about it, and just because tomorrow's game has the label of a playoff game, all those games earlier are playoff games because it's such a quick section season, and they may not recognize it, but how big that first win is or how big a sweep could be. Those are all playoff games to get you into the playoffs. So we try and revert back to that they've been in this situation. They're used to difficult games, situations, and just go out and play like we've been there before, and they have been.
I know you preach team coach, but can you talk about some of your individual players? Coming into the year, certainly you were looking at guys like Vinny Amatucci, Chase Sickenberger, Logan Short to really lead the way for you. And I know there's been some other guys that have stepped up. Can you kind of talk about those guys and maybe how they've embraced the challenge this year of being seniors?
Well, definitely our seniors. And every year, and this crew learned from last year. Last year's senior group was a phenomenal group. And they led by example. They went out there and they put it all out on the field. And this senior group is the same. They may not be starters, role players. They all have a role and they buy into it. And if you have that chemistry, you're going to be successful. And that's what the senior group brings to the table. And some younger guys have stepped up, like Eric Batista got that experience last year. Jake Kramer, new to the varsity level this year. He got in last year against Peters Township in the playoffs when Drew Clare went down. Logan Bradish is filling in nicely at first base. Dante is filling in when Chase pitches at second base. It takes that mentality of, doing whatever I can for the team. We've bounced back and forth with a DH role, and each kid, last one being Tony Mazzari, has really stepped up nicely. Every kid contributes to this team in one way or another, and that's testament to them and the success that we've had this year.
And for the playoffs, as you guys learned a few years ago, when you want to WPIAL state championship, you need to have those contributions from everybody, don't you?
Oh, definitely, and that's what it takes. And you said it. We preach team all the time. And that's our number one goal going into the season, to be a good team. Mm-hmm. And that's the mentality first, and then taking it out there on the field. As much time as these guys spend together in the off season, in the weight room, it's made them that much closer. And you see it in the games. They're truly excited for one another to be successful because they know that's going to contribute to the team's success.
And I'm not putting any pressure on them, but do you see any comparables in terms of that team chemistry with your WPIAL state championship team several years ago?
Oh, definitely. That team was so close, and they had that same approach. They were going to battle till the final out, and there were so many close games that they were in that they became comfortable in that situation, knowing that they were going to battle, they were going to fight till the end, they were going to give it everything and leave it all out there between those white lines. And that's what we've seen from this team. And I really think that they are ready to go tomorrow with that mentality.
And Coach, I mentioned Logan Short. He really leads your offense right now at the plate. What have you seen from his game that has allowed him to have so much success this year?
He's just a phenomenal two-strike hitter. He may get behind in the count, but he doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't get upset. He shortens that approach, and he's just a great kid at the plate for us.
What will you say is your biggest key to winning some games, making a run here in the WPIAL playoffs?
It all comes down to pitching. You have to have the pitching, and with that pitching goes the defense behind them. Because if the defense is solid, that's going to give them confidence up there on the mound. And I think with those two things comes the good at bats also. So one feeds off of the other, and it builds and grows. So I definitely think that the pitching is, and that's what's gotten us this far this year. it was definitely our pitching. So we look tomorrow to carry that over. Strong pitching, solid defense, and get guys on, move them up, drive them in.
What can you tell us about your first round opponent, Thomas Jefferson? I know coaches try to get scouting reports any way that they can. What can you kind of tell us about TJ?
We haven't seen him since we were in the section years ago together, and I expect the same type of a team. A tough, scrappy team. I have reached out to different people trying to get some stuff on them, and it's kind of what I expected. They're going to go out there and they're going to give it their all also, and they're going to fight till that final out. So I think tomorrow's going to be a great game.
A few years ago, that state title game, or the state title team, the WPIAL title team, you had the Barbie car going. What is it this year?
Well, we've had the Barbie car ever since then.
Oh, that's okay. That's still part. Okay.
And this year, we have a stuffed shark that swimming around the dugout over there. So that's the latest addition there. And when they sense a blood in the water, they got to go for it there.
Now, I guess I feel like I'm old and thinking about Jaws. I mean, the guys like go dun dun or not. Probably not.
No Jaws theme. They just get the shark out and runners in scoring position have those opportunities.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a lot of fun. And finally, Coach, I want to ask you, I know how close you are with guys like Jared Kolar, who's now pitching at Rutgers. I had a chance to watch the World Series games with you last year when Jerry was pitching for Seton Hill. And of course, another former player, Zach Kokoska, who was drafted, is now playing in the minor leagues. Has to be pretty cool to be able to follow those guys and some other Wildcats that are playing collegiately.
Definitely, especially those two, but all of them, using them as a reference and what they were able to do and how coachable they were, really. I mean, Zach, in the offseason, he came down and worked with the guys. They loved that. He was such a great inspiration to him. Jared, using some of the stuff that he did and how he's grown from that and using him as an example. It's great seeing those guys at the next level and all of them being able to point to them and say, when they were here, this is what they were doing. But really, those guys, how coachable they were, always wanting to work and get better. And I think that definitely trickles down to this team.
Matt, I appreciate it, buddy. From one dairy guy to another. I know you're a Latrobe guy now, but I still got to throw that in there. Congratulations on all your success this year, and go Wildcats. Good luck in the first round against TJ.
Thanks, Flick. Appreciate it.
And we thank Matt for taking the time. Oh, you and him, you've got a lot in common, right? I mean, you're both dairy area guys. I know he probably doesn't want that out there because he's all Greater Latrobe now, but he was a Trojan before he was a Wildcat.
He played with my brother. And you mentioned dairy success briefly. We'll talk about dairy here in a little bit. But last year, they won the first section title since 1992 when my brother and Matt were teammates at dairy. And Matt's dad, Norm, was one of the coaches. So,
who was the better player?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I got to say my brother, I guess, right? Or I'll get in trouble if I don't. But Matt's
well, they'll
off the
both
line
be
now,
watching
right?
this. So, I mean, you'll probably get in trouble one way or another, I guess.
I will. They were both pretty darn good. Matt was an infielder. My brother was a catcher. So, they remain good friends to this day. As a matter of fact, I think they usually do play every year. They tried to play this year, but with the rainouts and all the craziness, they weren't able to get a game in. But, he's done a really good job with Latrobe, and in a year that, I don't know how many people came into this season expecting the Wildcats to be as good as they've been, but they've certainly deserved this seed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we mentioned Penn Trafford, maybe a team that has some momentum, and I think that you look at that team, and there's a lot of pieces to like. Obviously, Brady Lane is a guy that we've talked about a little bit this year. Jason Sable. I mean, he played as a freshman. That almost never happens at Penn Trafford. So I really like what I've seen from him. And again, they have, much like Matt Basiano, Dan Miller knows what it takes to have success in the postseason. Remember, they were playing for a championship not too long ago. So I think this is a Penn Trafford team. There's a lot to like here as well. But again, to have success in baseball, you can't ride one good pitcher. You're going to have 2, 3, 4. It's about developing that depth. Ultimately, it's going to come to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think Penn Trafford does have some of that depth. Obviously, Dan's done a really nice job there It's a team that when you look at their section mark at 7-3 again, they come into the playoffs with a lot of momentum after sweeping Latrobe. After that sweep of Latrobe, the Warriors have went 2-2 in their last 4 games against some good opponents. They lost to North Allegheny 2-0, lost to Pine Richland 6-5 there in those couple of losses. But
I wouldn't call those bad losses by any
means. They were good. Yeah, obviously against some really good quality opponents, a little bit above them in classification. So we'll see what happens when the Warriors take on the Hampton Talbots here.
And talking about pitching, I think one of my favorite guys, Nasty Morasti, as what they call him, Nolan Morasti. Saw him earlier this season. He's a good one. So I think if they're going to have success, a guy like that's probably going to have to certainly step up and deliver. Well, we had the opportunity to talk to their head coach, who's had a lot of success, Dan Miller. Let's now hear the conversation between the Dans. Dan Flickinger talking to Dan Miller.
Being joined by Penn Trafford head coach Dan Miller in his 8th year, 7th season for the Warriors. Penn Trafford comes in as the number 8 seed and gets set to take on the Hampton Talbots later on today. The Warriors 13-6, 7-3 in the section, finishing in 2nd place. And first of all, Coach, we have to congratulate you getting to the playoffs. I'm sure that was one of your goals, and PT is in the WPIAL playoffs pretty much every year. So how did the regular season kind of play out in your eyes, Coach?
Well, first off, on behalf of all of us at Penn Trafford, I want to thank you for the opportunity to host this interview and thank the Westmoreland Sports Network for what they do for high school baseball. It's exciting to always either be involved in a broadcast or listen to one of your broadcasts. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that.
We're excited again. The regular season is a great time to kind of get things in proper order. But once the playoffs start, that's when the fun starts. That's when the kids become a little bit more lighthearted. Everyone has a little bit more hop in their step. And quite honestly, that's been the expectation. As much as I think we set our goals, and I think a lot of people are very similar where they set their goals for a section championship and then a playoff run and then maybe a WPIAL or a state championship, our expectation is to be in those playoffs every year. And this is now our 5th year in a row getting into the playoffs, and we're very proud of that fact.
Coach, you guys received the number 8 seed, and I know most coaches will say it doesn't matter what seed we are, we have to go out and play. But is that kind of what you expected before, thinking about where you would be seated?
Boy, that's a great question. There are so many teams in 5A that are so balanced. When you look at one-loss records, I mean, outside of Peters Township, who has 18 wins, there's a whole host of us that have 13, 14, 15 wins. And I thought just maybe, we might be seated a little bit higher because of our strength of schedule. We had some very good wins versus some very good playoff teams. Norwin obviously is a playoff team every year. Hempfield is a defending a WPIAL runner-up. We beat the defending champions in Franklin Regional. We beat a very good Yock section champion this year. And then we come down to the murderer's row of our season, the last 4 games. We're playing 3 out of 4 teams. We're number 1 teams at the time. So I thought maybe we could have been a little bit higher, but I think the committee does a fair job in trying to get it right.
Now, you guys finished the section schedule with a big doubleheader win over the Latrobe Wildcats, who ended up winning Section 1 5A. And I know you played some really tough games after that, but to be able to finish with a sweep of the section champion, what did that do for your team's confidence?
Well, it certainly gave us a leap of faith, knowing that we beat a team that beat everybody else in the section until they came to play us. And it gave us the opportunity, I think, to really get the motor started and get hot at the right time. I think everybody will tell you want to be hot coming into the playoffs. And I think that just jump-started our hot button here coming into the playoffs.
And in that doubleheader, you guys had contributions from a number of different players. Offensively, Brady Lane had 3 hits and 3 RBIs. Dylan Grabowski also had 3 hits in game 1. And then game 2, you get Tyler Freese had 3 hits. Jake Otto had a really nice game in really both games. And Grabowski had a huge pitching performance against the Wildcats in game 2 with 10 strikeouts. And again, I know you've played 4 games since then, but how important is it to get contributions from guys up and down the lineup? And is that something that you're expecting heading into the postseason here?
Well, it's a great question because it was huge for us to get those contributions on the offensive side. We had been a team that continues to preach pitching and defense. And we feel very confident if we can hold somebody under 3 runs, we can win a baseball game. It's just that sometimes, especially early in the year, we had trouble scoring 4. So in order to get that extra run, we would had to be creative. But lately, we've been swinging the bats well, and our runs per game average has gone up. So it was big for us to get contributions from everybody, but more importantly, to put more runs on the board rather than just the 3 or 4 we were used to getting.
Now, you mentioned Murderers Row, and you've played some really good teams since that sweep of Latrobe. You went 2-2, but both losses were to Pine Richland by 1 run and North Allegheny by 2 runs. You had a really good win over Montour, and you mentioned York won a section championship this year, and you beat the Cougars. So how do those games, wins or losses, get you ready for the postseason, playing them right before the playoffs start?
Well, we always want to play the best competition, and I never want to look ahead. But if we take care of business in the first round of the playoffs versus Hampton, we're looking to the number 1 seed at Peters Township, and I really wouldn't want to have it any other way. So to play those games right before we roll into the playoffs, again, at the time we played Montour, they were number 1. North Allegheny was number 1. Pine Richland was a 2. York was a section champion. It benefited us to be able to play those games and play competitive in those games, as opposed to getting a layup and just continuing to pad our 1-loss record. That may have helped us, to your earlier question, in the seeding. If we would have had a few more wins, all of a sudden we're 16, 17 wins. But I think ultimately, for the betterment of the team going into this year, into the playoffs, that was the right call. And we'll continue to play a competitive schedule.
I mentioned Dylan Grabowski earlier, your other top pitcher, Nolan Morasti. Both of those guys pitched very well this year, and that, I guess, presents a challenge for you and the coaching staff on who you go to in game 1. I won't ask you. I know you're not going to unveil who you're going to go to, but talk about the way those guys threw this year. And I know it's a team effort. There's other guys out of the bullpen as well, but just the way they threw in section play, and I guess the challenge that lies ahead to see who you're going to go with later today.
Well, you can certainly ask, but I won't
Coach,
tell.
who will you go with later today?
Listen, I'll let you know first pitch.
Okay, sounds good.
We discussed that today after practice as a staff, and we brought Dylan Grabowski into the room. We brought Nolan Morasti into the room, and we brought Evan Del Signor into the room as well. Mm-hmm. Grabowski and Morasti have both pitched about 40 innings this year. Del Signor's probably pitched about 27 or 28, but he was very good against North Allegheny in keeping them to 2 runs and pitching a full 7-inning game. So I think it was fair to them as the leader of this program to bring them in and communicate, because they all want to know. So when we bring them in to talk to them, we want them to know what we're thinking as a staff and where we see them for this first round of the playoffs. And the answer, quite honestly, is I told them all to be ready.
That's right.
We want them all to be ready. We don't know what's going to happen, but all 3 of them are very close, not only as teammates, but in competitiveness. Morasti's a bulldog. He wants the ball all the time. He's a guy that's going to pitch with a chip on his shoulder. His last big playoff game, we threw him to the Wolves against West Allegheny last year. He gave up 5 runs, and we thought we were just going to get pummeled, only to lose on a walk-off walk in the bottom of the 7th. So he's a guy that wants the ball. Grabowski is a guy that continues to be hot. He's a big game pitcher for us. So we got 2 big game pitchers, and we've got a guy that we've groomed in Del Signor that I think is not afraid to take the mound either. We feel very confident behind all 3 of them.
And now that we're talking about pitchers, I wanted to get your opinion, Coach, on, you've had a chance to look at it now for a couple of years with the section games now being played on consecutive days. Of course, rain kind of changes that every once in a while, but is that something that you like from what the WPIAL changed in the schedule a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think it's more real baseball. It gives us an opportunity as coaches to challenge ourselves as far as strategy. And then again, when weather has certainly played a factor in it for us this year, especially early in the year with all the rain outs, but we're fortunate that we do have a deep staff. So you can ask me that every year. And as long as we have a deep staff, I'll tell you, I love it. If we're thin, I'm going to tell you, let's stretch those games out a little bit.
Right. Coach, who are maybe a couple of guys that have really stepped up for you this year from the beginning of the year until now that you've seen really mature and maybe have their game go from, down here to up here by the end of the season now in the playoffs?
Well, I think I'll start with our young guys because we were a very young team last year that finished 13-7. When you look at us this year, we're almost identical. We have the same group of guys. We finished 13-6. But hopefully we can get a little bit deeper into the playoffs. But it starts with the young guys. And we carried some sophomores this year that I don't think we're expecting to play much, and either by someone else's misfortune or by their own talent, they were thrown into the game. One of them is Ian Temple, our catcher. Ian Temple was probably projected to be a utility player for us. His primary position is a catcher. But our starting catcher and all-conference catcher last year in 2021, Jacob Haynes, was hurt playing high school football in the state championship game. And unfortunately, he hasn't been back yet. But Ian Temple has been more than serviceable. So he's a guy that has stepped up as a young sophomore to catch 19 games for us without a break. We have another young infielder who's a sophomore, and Brody Hoffman. Every time Grabowski pitches, Brody Hoffman plays second base. So he's gotten a lot of work defensively every time Grabowski takes the mound, and he's done more than admirable filling in at second base when Grabowski's on the mound. And then I continue to go up the middle when you go from Temple to Brody Hoffman to Jason Sable. I wanted to say Jordan Sable, but Jordan was the older brother.
Right.
Jason Sable in center field, who came to us halfway through the year last year as a freshman, is now matured and only playing as a sophomore. So we had three guys up the middle that were sophomores that have done very well and contributed, whether it was offensively, defensively, or just held their own. But also, too, I will tell you, one of the guys that has stepped up for us this year is Brady Lane. Brady Lane, we've worked him at first base last year, told him throughout the summer that he probably ought to continue to work at first base because we have a very competitive middle infield in Grabowski and Otto. And Brady Lane has accepted that role and has done very well at first base for us.
Coach, you obviously know what it takes to get to a WPIAL championship game, doing so a couple of years ago. And of course, we think fondly back on that time when McLean Mon was leading you there, and just what a competitor and what kind of kid that he was. But what does it take to get to a WPIAL championship game? I know you're taking it game by game, but what will it take for your team to compete for one this year?
Well, certainly thank you for referencing McLean. We all miss McLean Mond. His spirit continues to live with our program through his competitive nature. And those are some of the things that you can't teach. For us to continue to be a championship caliber team, it starts with structure. Our staff does a great job in providing structure with all of our practice plans. And then it continues with accountability. And we ask all of our players to be accountable, to know every day what we're going to work on and what we're going to practice. And then after that, it becomes disciplined and being good, disciplined baseball players. Coupled with the fact that playing good at the right time certainly is a part of that recipe for success as well. So, but I think for us, it really starts with the word team. We want to take every player that we have on our roster and emphasize to them that this is all about team. And if they continue to keep that in mind, and there's ebbs and flows, as you know, during the course of a ball game, during the course of a season. But I think they all know that everything that we do is all about the team comes first.
And Coach, finally, we'll wrap up the interview talking about your first round opponent, the Hampton Talbots. What do you know about them? What have you been able to kind of, scout when you've been looking at Hampton?
Yeah, Hampton is an interesting matchup for us because I believe they come in as a very hungry group. They have played a very competitive schedule, much like us as far as non-conference, playing a bunch of 6A schools. They've played the North Alleghenies, the Seneca Valleys, the Butlers, Upper St. Clair. So they're battle tested. I think they come in also to maybe a little bit hungry because they've lost 5 of their last 6, and they got bounced in the playoffs last year by a very good West Allegheny team. So I'm expecting them to come in with a chip on their shoulder and ready to play playoff baseball.
Coach, it's always great talking baseball with you. Thanks again for your kind comments at the beginning of the interview, and go Warriors. Good luck.
Okay. Thanks, Dan, for having us. And on behalf of all of us at Penn Trafford School District, we appreciate what Westmoreland Sports Network does. Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
And we thank Coach Miller for taking the time. We mentioned there's one other Westmoreland County team in this bracket, and that is the defending champion, Franklin Regional Panthers. What a season it was in 2021. I think we knew this team was going to take a step back, right? I mean, you look at what they lost and some of the names: Andrew Morocco, Brian Perrone, who's now at Seton Hill, Tim Quinn at Mercyhurst, Treelor, Kagaris, so many great players who moved on. But the cupboard not bare. And I think one of the guys that's just been an incredible story, whether we're covering football, we're covering basketball, we're covering baseball, we're talking about Caden Smith. And he's taken his game to the next level. He's become a pretty reliable presence on the mound this year, including his good work in the outfield. He's playing some infield. He's just one of the guys that knows what it takes, that was part of that championship team last year. And certainly they're going to lean on those guys who were part of the team last year as they try to make another postseason run.
Yeah, 3-sport athlete, a leader, just a born leader. Always love talking to him, whether it's off the air or on the air. You can always chat with him a little bit. And I know that he wants to go out the right way. He's going to play football in college, committed to Pitt as a walk-on. Yeah. So congratulations to him. But yeah, I mean, you look at Franklin Regional down the stretch, only one loss since April 12th, and that was to Hempfield, a team they're not going to see, obviously, in the playoffs. So they're playing the right way coming into the postseason. It's interesting, Sean, when you look at the way that the WPIAL has now aligned your section play. I love it, first of all, now that you play the same team in consecutive days, Monday and Tuesday, of course, unless it rains. But I love that the WPIAL has done that. And obviously they've done that so you don't have to, one team doesn't have to face an ace pitcher twice in a season. You have to use your pitching depth. I think that's great. The only downside to it really is if you're not playing your best baseball at the beginning of the year and you play one of the good teams in your section, you might lose the section title right off the bat. And I think when you look at, what Franklin Regional did, they lost 3 of 4 to Penn Trafford and Latrobe right at the beginning of the year. So they might be playing their best baseball right now. But if you don't play your best baseball out of the gate and you're playing some other good teams in your section, you might not be able to win a section title. But still, you finish 7-3 in the section, and now you have a chance in the playoffs. You get in again. You don't know what can happen.
Absolutely. And we mentioned, obviously, Caden Smith, but they have some other good ones. Ryan Del Canton, a Mountain Union commit. John Carroll is where Jordan Suvak is headed. So, yeah, some really good, talented players there on a team that is trying to defend its title in 5A. The only knock I have on Franklin Regional, won't give them too hard of a time, that they kept Kiski area out of the playoffs. We could have had the Cavaliers in there as well, but Franklin Regional won a game against the Cavs, who had a win-in-your-in scenario. And poor Aaron Albert, he had to cut a wrestling promo afterwards, bashing Franklin Regional, I believe, for keeping them out of the playoffs. So
I think he was actually challenging them. Yeah, even though they already made it in, he was like, let's no, I'm just kidding. Bring a ladder out onto the mound.
Wrestler Ashton Amherst, often known as Coach Albert. But
hey, Aaron, thanks so much, man. If he's tuned in, he's great to talk with, and he really poured his heart and soul into this year. Kiski just unfortunately missed the postseason.
Absolutely. That will do it for the 5A bracket. Take a look at the 4A bracket now, and unfortunately, no Westmoreland County teams in this one, so we'll keep it relatively quick. Number 1 seed Montour gets a bye and moves on to the quarterfinals that will be played on Monday, the 23rd. All of the first-round matchups in this bracket take place on Wednesday. That includes number 8 Highlands against number 9 Quaker Valley. That'll take place at Plum. Number 4 Laurel Highlands advances courtesy of a bye and will await the winner of number 5 Beaver and number 12 Elizabeth Forward. Those teams will clash at Fox Chapel Area High School. Other side of the bracket, West Mifflin. What a season it's been for the Titans. They get the number 2 seed and move on to the quarters, where they'll face either number 7 Indiana area or number 10 Blackhawk. Those teams meet at Seneca Valley. Number 3 is North Catholic. Trojans get a bye and will face either number 6 Knock or number 11 Uniontown. If you're in Westmoreland County, you want to check out a baseball matchup, you can do so, as those teams will play at Norwin at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. 3 teams from this one have state qualifying berths. Again, unfortunately, no Westmoreland County teams, so we will now move on to the 3A bracket. That's not a concern here. We got a bevy of Westmoreland County teams, and we'll hear from a couple of the head coaches. It is a full 16-team bracket, beginning with the number 1 seed Hopewell Vikings against number 16 South Allegheny. They're going to play that one at Washington and Jefferson College today. By the way, congratulations, Washington and Jefferson won another President's Athletic Conference baseball title. I think they've won every year for the past 50 years, it feels like.
Yeah, they've been dominant, man.
We cover Seton Hill a lot, and you're used to great tradition for the Griffins. It's even more success for W&J in that conference at the D3 level. So Hopewell against South Allegheny. The winner of that one moves on to the quarters, which will be played on Thursday. So again, first round and the quarterfinals 2 days apart. So you're going to have to show some pitching depth. The winner of that matchup will face either number 8 Deer Lakes or number 9 McGuffey. That matchup today at Peterswood Park. All of the games, weather permitting, in the first round will take place today. Also on that side of the bracket, number 4 Mohawk against number 13 Keystone Oaks. They'll play that one at Seneca Valley High School. And guaranteed to have a Westmoreland County team moving on, it's number 5 York, number 12 Mount Pleasant area. They'll play that one today, 2 o'clock at Hempfield Area High School. We're going to hear from Craig Spizak, the coach of the Cougars, in just a bit. On the other side of the bracket, the number 2 seed goes to the South Park Eagles. They'll go against Waynesburg Central, the number 15 seed at West Mifflin High School. Winner of that one will face either number 7 New Brighton or number 10 Derry Area, playing at Highlands High School. If that sounds familiar, with good reason. We'll get to that momentarily. We'll also hear from the head coach of the Trojans, John Flickinger. Also on that side, number 3 Avonworth against number 14 Southmoreland. Scotties are postseason bound for the first time in a while. That matchup also at Highlands High School. That will be a 7 o'clock start, so that will follow the Trojans and Lions matchup. And also on that side, number 6 East Allegheny, number 11 Elwood City. They will play the first of the triple header at Highlands, 2 o'clock start time. So we got a lot of scratch-off chances, I guess, to have a deep postseason run, looking at the Westmoreland County aspect of it here in the 3A bracket. We mentioned one team's guaranteed to move on, York against Mount Pleasant. So unfortunately, it also means one team's guaranteed to lose. But, that should be a decent matchup. York is a team that they've had some pretty good baseball success, and you maybe don't think of Cougars baseball necessarily in that light. But Craig Spizak's done a great job. We're going to hear from him. But, I saw them in a victory against Southmoreland earlier this season. They needed to have some dramatics to do so. They got their offense going in the bottom of the 7th. But I think that's a team that they play some good defense and get some good pitching. And usually if you have both of those, you're going to have a chance in the postseason.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Craig's a really good coach. They've been incredibly competitive under him. And really, maybe it's a program, as you mentioned, that kind of flies under the radar a little bit, but they're a very good program. They compete and win section titles. So that should be a really cool matchup. You have 2 Westmoreland County teams playing against one another at Hempfield. And they just played, actually, Sean, 6 days ago, actually, I guess a week ago, on May 10th, with York winning 8-7 over Mount Pleasant. So a non-section game. And then look, they're going to play a week later. So that's kind of neat.
I would think, I don't know this for sure, that Alan Novacek probably gets the start for the Cougars. I saw him in that victory against Southmoreland. He was sterling. So very, very good player. And they have some other guys that, college bound for football. But it seems like at York, they don't just have guys who only play baseball, right? They have some guys that play football, that play basketball. A lot of multi-sport athletes. They have a bevy of soccer players on the baseball team as well. Don't see that a ton. That's kind of a unique mix. But I think it's a team that has a chance. Obviously, you mentioned, though, it's not even going to be easy to move on in the first round because the Vikings gave them all that they could handle. And Coach Firmstone has a pretty good program up there as well. So that should be a good one at Hempfield area if anyone wants to go check it out. Also, in this classification, we mentioned Southmoreland moves on, and that's a big accomplishment for a Scotties team that has been kind of maligned over the years. Al Govern's done a really nice job with that program because you go back a couple of years, they were 0-16 in 2017. Now they're in the playoffs. They had to take some baby steps to get there. but Coach Govern's done a fine job, and his son has certainly helped that cause, Anthony Govern, one of the best all-around athletes we've seen in Westmoreland County.
Yeah, and I always love giving him shout outs too through our wrestling coverage. Obviously,
what's
great
his
wrestler.
nickname?
Well, McLovin. That's his nickname. I don't know if I should go tell the whole story. I don't know if Chris Smith, our wrestling guy, is watching right now or not. But one of our wrestling colleagues and broadcasters, Jeff Shaw, accidentally called him a different name. And then they all said, oh, McLovin, maybe it's McLovin. We'll call him McLovin, something along those lines. So that's where he got the nickname from. But yeah, he's a terrific wrestler and obviously a very good baseball player, a really good kid too. So happy to see the success that he is having. The one thing I'll say about Southmoreland is, I mean, you look at the end of the year, man, they lost 5 of their last 6 games. So, you know, you hope that they can kind of turn it around. They lost to McGuffey 10-4, and then they were swept by York actually 7-1 and 3-2. So and lost to Derry as well in that stretch. So obviously they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of turn things around as they get into the postseason here, as they're going to play a really good team in Avonworth.
Well, yeah, and so it's interesting because Southmoreland and York, when those two teams met, they both had a chance to potentially win that section. It went in favor of the Cougars. They obviously, finished on a high note. Southmoreland did not. The good news is Scotties are still in the postseason. But on the other side, you look at York, and when you can win a section title by earning it at the very end of the season, knocking off maybe not necessarily a rival, but another nearby school where you have a little bit of familiarity, I think that can certainly boost things headed to the playoffs. And that's something that obviously we talked to with Craig Spizak before throughout the season when I did that game afterwards. And Flick, you had a chance to talk to Coach Spizak. Always enjoy him, whether it be with the high school team, or we've seen him a lot over the years as well with American Legion. I know he said he's given it up, but that's a guy that's molded a lot of youth for baseball there.
And on the basketball court too.
Now joined by the head coach of the York Cougars baseball team, Craig Spizak, as his team claims the section title in Class 3A Section 4 postseason bound. First off, Craig, I'm sure it's a major accomplishment to win a section title. That's usually one of a team's goals heading into the season. What did that mean to you and the players?
It definitely was one of our goals, and it's very important to our players. They set that as one of their marks they wanted to achieve this year. So it was nice for them to work to get to that point.
And the good news, I guess, is not only did you win the section, but you won it pretty convincingly. And I would imagine that knowing that you already had the section locked up, it maybe allowed you to try to set things up heading into the playoffs. So what were you trying to accomplish the last handful of games after you had already secured that first place finish?
We definitely wanted to work on some little things in our game to improve ourselves. A couple players here and there to get some more reps to hopefully get their game where it needs to be. There's a lot of different things we want to work on at that point, but it's definitely approaches at the batter's box, how the two-strike approach, the things about chasing pitches out of the zone, defensively, the little things to work on. We definitely wanted to try to fine-tune our game going into the playoffs.
So your team put together a pretty nice season, obviously 10-7 overall record, which means that in terms of the non-section, you didn't do all that well. But what were you trying to accomplish with some of those games?
I like the teams we played. It gave us a nice challenge. We played Highlands, who's a ranked team in 4A. We played Penn Trafford, who's had a great season in 5A, and Seton LaSalle, who's had a very good season in AA. So those teams were giving us very good looks for us to go into the playoffs with, and it definitely, I think, helped us see some good pitching in addition to good hitters for our pitchers to face.
And another team that you played out of section is Mount Pleasant area. We'll get to that one in just a moment. Let's talk a little bit about some of the particular players. Now, I broadcast your victory. It was a dramatic come-from-behind win against Southmoreland. I believe that one clinched at least a share of the section title for your team. And then, obviously, as we mentioned, you won it outright. But Alan Novacek on the mound was outstanding in that game. And I know he's been one of your main guys this season. When you think about his campaign, what stood out?
He was very composed on the mound. He worked to get ahead of hitters a lot, and he did a very good job of mixing his pitches up.
Now, to win a section title, to get into the postseason with a good seed, you need a number of guys to contribute. Who are some of maybe the guys who have gone under the radar that have really been instrumental and maybe pleasant surprises even this year to you?
Our The four seniors that have gotten the playing time, the bulk of their playing time, they've done a great job. All four have contributed a great deal in our season. Christian Park, Caden Bizazzaro, Taylor O'Delly, and Ellen Novacek. Some juniors as well. We've had some very good contributions from our juniors. Jack Sampson, Carson Pasinski, James Showman. He's been our number 2 pitcher and done a great job on the mound as well. And it's been a group effort. When I look at our stats, there's no one person that stands out statistically. It's spread across the board pretty evenly, and that's nice to see from a group of 9 to 12 guys that are equally contributing.
I know you said there were some things that you wanted to work on down this stretch, but what do you think maybe some of the strengths of this team have been all throughout the season?
I like how our kids, the mental attitude of it's a tough trait to find in a young group of kids, that they hate to lose and they refuse to give up on any game, no matter what the score is. Winning or losing, they have a good trait of, they just are very persistent with trying to be the best they can be. And sometimes it's hard to teach a kid to do that. And they've done a very good job of grasping that.
Let's talk about the 3A bracket. I think some coaches generally are happy with the seed. Some have something to gripe about. I think you would probably fall in that latter category. You win the section, and yet you get the number 5 seed. So what did you maybe anticipate going in? And then what was your reaction when you found out that you got the 5th seed despite winning your section?
I wasn't displeased at all. I was actually very happy. I was anticipating anywhere between 5, 6, or 7, quite honestly. So I don't really look at those seedings too much. And I don't worry about that, because it's nothing that I tell our kids, we can't control that. We can only worry about things we can control. And whatever they put us, we still have to go and play our games. And if we want to get to the end, we need to win 4 games no matter where we're seated at. So it's just a matter of, I wasn't really concerned about that, quite honestly.
That being said, is that something, at least with the players, that you can use as a motivating factor?
I don't know if they're worried about that or not. They probably, to some degree, maybe are, but I like to think they follow what we set as an example, and I don't know if they're really worried about that. They just want to go out and play.
Well, I guess one of the positives of getting the number 5 seed is that you probably don't have to do as much research on your first round opponent. You're going against a team that you played with in the last couple of weeks, the Mount Pleasant area Vikings. So not only have you seen them recently, but I would assume being another Westmoreland County team, you probably already had some awareness with their program and their coach Firmstone. What stands out about the Vikings?
I coached at Mount Pleasant for a couple of years before I got the head job at York. So I know Chris very well. He's a great coach. Him and Coach Capozzi and the rest of that staff are excellent coaches. It's a great program. I enjoyed my time there, and I anticipate their best game. They always have good athletes. They always have a good program. It'll be, it's a rivalry game for us. We play them in the summer twice a year. Sometimes we see them in the fall, and they used to be in our section, so we'd see them every time in the spring twice a year as well. So the kids are very familiar with each other. It'll be a fun game.
And the first time you played, it was a 8-7 victory in favor of the Cougars. How did you approach that game? How did they approach it? Was it comparable to a playoff type game, or was it sort of one where you're maybe getting a little bit deeper into the benches just to get some, guys some playing time?
I would anticipate that second part, the latter part of that was probably what both coaches were looking to achieve. Yeah.
So can you take anything from a game like that in terms of seeing them a second time in a span of a week?
Sure. They still, we still have to hit the ball. We both still have to pitch the ball and field the ball. So it's just, you get to see their players still. So it's definitely, I'm sure, he's taking out of it as much as I took out of it. So it's definitely, it's beneficial to both teams, I'm sure.
I know that the playoffs are a different animal than the regular season. That being said, I would think most of your guys have some experience because you made the postseason a year ago, and then you go back to 2019. And I know that you said there's only a handful of seniors, but they were at least around at that time when your team went 10-2 in the section and made the playoffs. So do you think that the experience of a lot of the guys being there maybe makes it a little bit easier when you first step out onto the field for that first playoff game?
It's definitely very helpful. I have no doubt. The seniors were here, was freshmen when we had our nice run in 2019. We've been very fortunate in 2020 and 21 in the summer season. Legion, we went to the regional tournament both years, and bulk of those kids have played in that. in addition to as you mentioned, our playoff game last year. So there's definitely some experience in some big games for these kids, and hopefully that'll pay off for us.
And lastly, we talked about one of the goals for most teams heading into a season is to win a section title. You accomplished that one. So what are the goals from here on out now that the postseason's underway?
Let's win a game. We'll go from there. One game at a time. That's I've learned through the years of coaching that you can't take anything for granted. We're happy to be where we're at, but we're not satisfied. But at the same time, you can't look ahead at all. I mean, any team can beat anyone. The seedings are kind of irrelevant at this point. It's just a matter of going out and playing. We know every team in the playoffs at least has one or more good pitcher, and we're going to see their best, and vice versa. So it's you can't take anything for granted. If we're fortunate enough to win, we'll be very happy. I'm sure Mount Pleasant's, they're saying the same thing. It's just you're looking forward to one game at a time at this point.
Well, Craig, thanks so much for doing this. Flick and I joke that it's tough for us because we're guaranteed that one of the Westmoreland County teams is going to win, but conversely, one of them is going to have their season end as well. So we're right down the middle on this one, but hopefully,
I get it.
Hopefully, it'll be a great game. We'll say that much.
Thank you.
All right, that's Craig Spizak, head coach for the Yawk baseball team. And we appreciate the time from Coach Spizak, but there's still one team we haven't touched on here in this 3A bracket, and this is near and dear to your heart, Flick. It is the Derry area Trojans. You are a former terrific baseball star there in your own right, and now your brother, the head coach. I'll say this. It was a special year in 2021, and I had questions. Would they be able to follow it up? Because that's now a little bit of pressure, right? I mean, they're not used to being a marked team. And I know that John Flickinger said, we're not rebuilding, we're reloading. I think it was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning of the season, but, ultimately, I think they have to be pretty happy with the season they had. And now they've had a playoff victory from a year ago. The good news for them, the team they beat last year, that's the same team that they're playing this year in New Brighton. Interesting how that worked out.
Yeah, how about it? And last year, Derry actually mercy rolled or 10-run rolled New Brighton in a game played at Latrobe, which was really a cool atmosphere. Derry's first win since 2005. But yeah, I mean, what more could you ask for the Trojans? They didn't win a section title this year, but they had an opportunity going into their second to last section series of the season against East Allegheny. They win the first game. If they win the second game against EA, then I believe they only would have had to win one game against Ligonier Valley, maybe two, to win a section title. But
you're doing a lot of math right now.
They had an opportunity. They kind of had destiny in their hands. Unfortunately, they beat EA in the first game, lost 8-2 in the second game. So East Allegheny won the section title, and then they did split the section series with Ligonier Valley. But I think it comes down to a few things for Derry. Certainly Ryan Hood, who is heading to Gannon. He is a really, really good pitcher. His last two starts, he didn't necessarily have his best stuff, and a couple of losses actually to Ligonier and East Allegheny. So they're going to need him to be his best against a New Brighton team that was they had some young, good players last year. So obviously they're back and looking for revenge this year. But if you have Ryan at his best, I think he has an opportunity certainly to get you a win in a playoff game. And that's what Coach Flickinger and Derry is looking towards him to do. And obviously defense has been an issue for a younger Derry team this year. They've made a number of errors. They've been able to clean it up, I think, a little bit better than maybe they were at the beginning of the year. So obviously the defense needs to be clean in a playoff game too.
And maybe because it's, he and I are pretty tight at this point, but I was surprised that Coach Flick, he did not hide the fact that he said, we're going Ryan Hood as our pitcher. And you sometimes, even if you can kind of speculate and assume, coaches don't like stuff. They don't like giving any advantage beforehand to I'm sure New Brighton was expecting that, but I appreciate him being honest and saying we're throwing Ryan Hood, because Nate Papuga has been really good recently for them.
He has. I mean, he started a non-section game against Indiana in the last game of the year. Didn't pitch great, but his last two section starts were really good. He's only a sophomore, so he's going to have ups and downs, which he's had this year. And Sean, I don't know if this was made public. I mean, there was, a ceremony a little bit before the game they played against Ligonier that this will be my brother's last year as the head coach at Derry. They presented him with a baseball bat, and one of the seniors, I can't remember who it was, grabbed the microphone and kind of thanked him for everything. So, man, he's been there for such a long time as not only as a head coach, but as an assistant coach. I mean, I graduated 2003. And he had already coached for a few seasons as an assistant. So I just want to congratulate my brother. It was obviously a great story last year, and I'm certainly rooting for them, hoping that they can, get this first playoff win against New Brighton and see where it takes them.
Now, is there any truth to the rumor that you sort of coerced him into that so that you can use him as a broadcaster in the spring?
100%. Yes. No. More like I think Hayden, my nephew, coerced him. I'm sure it's not Hayden's decision because he loves being around
Hayden's
the guys.
going to be broadcasting for us.
He's going to be, 100%. But Hayden will miss being around the guys. I'm sure he'll still be at the many dairy games if I don't pull him away and have him doing, Penn Trafford and Franklin Regional and those schools. But I think we might have to throw him on the broadcaster's payroll in the spring.
Absolutely. Well, I had the opportunity to talk to the other Flick, John Flickinger, head coach for the Trojans before their matchup against the Lions. Let's hear now from Coach Flickinger. First off, congratulations once again, postseason bound, Coach. I know that that has to be exciting to get back to the playoffs, especially with all the players you lost last year. So I know you still have more work to do, but how good did it feel when your team knew that you had clinched that postseason spot?
Yeah, it was a good feeling, Sean. Certainly, when you lose what we lost a year ago, and we had some capable players coming back, but to get back to the postseason and have the season that we did, I feel that we overachieved in many areas this year. And one of our goals was to win the section. We fell a little bit short of that, and we got to the postseason. So that's all you can ask for. But thank you so much.
And so I know when I talked to you before the season, you basically said we want to reload, not rebuild. And that's, I think, in large part because last year sort of set the bar in terms of a winning culture. Did you feel, was there a little bit of a different aura surrounding the program this season?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just, we as a program sat and talked at the beginning of the season, and we did talk about that. And I know it's cliche, but, we did feel that we had a younger team, but a team that was capable, a team that had some experience coming back from the year before. So I think, what our concern was where were we able to come together at the right time and have that chemistry. And, pitching was a key this year. And, we did have, a kid like Ryan Hood who, stood out for us, but we needed more than that to get there, and our guys really stepped up and did that. And, we won some close games. We lost some close games. I mean, it could have went either way, but the bottom line is I think the key to this season was very similar to last season, is that the kids accepted their roles, every one of them, whether it be a senior not playing, but having to be a runner or something like that, very similar to what we had last year. Some of the younger guys stepping up and getting a lot of playing time and producing chemistry. And chemistry is a big part of any sport, of any team. And that's what, that's what kind of put us over the top this year to get here.
And so you go 6-4 in the section. And at least from my perspective, it was one of the more unpredictable sections. I don't think many people penciled East Allegheny as potentially a section winner. We knew Deer Lakes was going to be a good team. So in terms of how maybe the section prepared you for postseason baseball, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, obviously, we're a pretty good section overall. I mean, there's a lot of parity in our section. There was some outstanding pitching. You talked about East Allegheny. They have two very, good pitchers that can go a long way in the postseason. In Nate Holmes and Michael Cahill. They are both, quality high school pitchers that can take you far. So that certainly prepares you. You look at Deer Lakes, Brannigan and Danka, those two, pitching in our section was pretty good this year. Mount Pleasant stepped up. They had a freshman, I believe his last name is Drozel, that really, opened up some eyes. So from a section perspective, I think our section was good. I really do. And I think that prepared us and has prepared us to get into the postseason and to feel comfortable. I looked at our section and I looked, at the seeds and things like that. And I'm not going to bellyache about it, but our section, did not get, what I feel was as much respect as I thought. But that's a good thing because, you can kind of use that as motivation for your teams, but we'll see what happens, how it all plays out. You got to go play the game, and that's the way it is.
And you talk about maybe the somewhat of a lack of respect for the section as a whole. Your team in particular gets the number 10 seed. So was that what you anticipated going in?
I mean, yeah, look, I've between being a player at Derry and being a coach at Derry, one former coach years ago, he's not with us anymore, but he was a fantastic coach, but he always used to joke and say that I don't think the WPIAL knows where Derry is, from a geographical standpoint. And that's okay. Look, last year we were section champs. We got the 5 seed. It is what it is. Again, I'm not going to complain about it. Did I think maybe we deserved a higher seed? Did the kids think that? Absolutely. I thought, being a 6-4 section finisher and looking at the tiebreakers and see how that finishes in your section, we really were the number 2 team coming out of our section when you look at tiebreakers, but they don't look at that. The committee doesn't look at that when they form their opinions. They look at maybe exhibition schedules. We didn't play the strongest of exhibition schedules. I understand that. But the bottom line is we're in the playoffs. And our kids know that. And even though they were a little bit disappointed when the pairings came out, the bottom line is you got to play the game anyway. And they changed their mind very quickly, after we had a discussion. Disappointed, maybe a little, that maybe I thought we should have been the 7 seed. Maybe they be the 10 seed, but surprised? Absolutely not.
And maybe there is a little bit of a silver lining because one, from the coach's perspective, you probably don't have to do as much preparation for your first round opponent because it's the same team that you played last year in New Brighton. So as you mentioned, the Lions this year are the better seed between the two, but how much can you take from last year's matchup and apply that maybe to this year?
I mean, I think the fact that we played them, you can do that, but they're a year older. Their entire team, with the exception of a couple of players, back this year. I know they'll probably throw Bobby Budacki at us. Great kid, outstanding kid. I mean, I don't know him personally to like I do a player on my team, but we did meet last year, and I did tell him after the game, I'll never forget this, that he had a heck of a year and he's going to have a heck of a future. I never anticipated that the following year would be playing against them again. But hey, look, I told our guys, I said, they have the majority of their kids coming back from a year ago. They're going to be ready for us. They want, revenge or however you want to look at it, but they have another shot. We beat them 10-0 last year. And in another way, a lot of the kids on our squad played in that game. So it's interesting. You always kind of want to play different people and things like that. But when I saw New Brighton, I kind of thought when I looked at the, pairings and kind of how they would go, that we would have a shot. They were on my list of 4 that we would probably play. And well-coached team, a lot of talent, and they play in a solid section as well. So I'm looking forward to that challenge again and seeing those guys again.
And so earlier you talked about Ryan Hood, and I think everyone thought that's going to be the guy for your pitching staff if all things go according to plan. But really, Nate Papuga at times looked like maybe he could be your best pitcher. So with the exception of maybe some very rare teams that are prohibitive favorites and they're looking at multiple rounds, every team has to do what it takes to get to the next round for the most part in the baseball playoffs. How do you approach it from a pitching staff standpoint, knowing you could play 2 games in 3 days?
You got to win the first one to get to the second one. I mean, I've always approached it that way. From the time I was a head coach at Derry, in past years when I was an assistant, we would have that conversation. You really have to win today before you get to tomorrow. And I know it's, if you're a 1 versus 16, or whatever the case may be, your mindset may be a little bit different with the type of team you have. But Ryan Hood's going to pitch for us. He's going to start for us. He's our number 1. We're going to go at, New Brighton in that first round. And when we get to the second round, we'll rely on some of the guys like Nate Papuga and guys that got us there. Over the years, I've seen a lot of things happen at the high school level in baseball. And we'll take our chances. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question, because, some coaches have differing opinions. But for me, you're not going to get to round 2 if you don't win round 1.
I know anytime you get deep into the season, especially postseason, you need some veterans, you need some leaders. And in addition to Hood, who's, by the way, also really outstanding as a hitter for your team, there's some other guys that you mentioned heading into the season that sort of took on that leadership. How has that evolved? Where does it stand in terms of the guys that you're going to be leaning upon once you head into that playoff game?
I think that's a big part of it, because, as the year progressed, the guys who I anticipated would step up, the seniors such as Braden Mickenack and Nick Thomas and Jake Watson, those guys did in a big way. Noah Simmerman as well. I don't want to leave him out. They were able to take some of the younger guys under their wing. And, late in the season, I started seeing some of the younger guys when games were really tight and they mattered. Some of the younger guys tightened up at times, and that's part of being young and learning. And those guys were there to step up for them. So I couldn't be happier with where we're at there. And again, I go back to the chemistry of our team. Those guys believe in each other. We've kind of had a Jekyll and Hyde end of our season, and I'm hoping the high side is yet to come, because there were games when we play a complete game, we're very tough to beat against any team. I'll say that, forward. But if we struggle defensively, and I don't care if Ryan's pitching or whomever, we struggle defensively, we're not going to win games. And I always talk about the little things. And I said in the playoffs, it's magnified. You have to make the routine plays look routine. You have to throw strikes. You can't walk people, and you have to come through with key hits. And we did that in game 1 last year. And it was just a wonderfully executed game plan in game 1. And then we went into the second round against McGuffey. We pitched well, we played good defense, but we couldn't come through with the timely hitting. So you need all those in the playoffs. And, just to answer your question, I think the leadership has at least stepped up, and we're going to go give it a shot and see what happens.
Well, John, thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations on getting back to the postseason, and hopefully we'll get a couple more victories out of the Trojans from here on out.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Absolutely. John Flickinger, head coach of Derry Area Baseball. And we thank Coach John Flickinger for taking the time. He is obviously the more handsome of the Flickingers, as you.
Well, oh my gosh!
I mean,
goodbye, Sean. I'm ending the show. Oh, I'm back.
I mean, it's they can judge for themselves, I guess. Okay,
I guess so.
Since we're stepping our game up, we got as many coaches as possible to do this via Zoom. Didn't work out with everyone. It's not as easy. But so we get to see Coach Flickinger. We don't just get to hear him, and people can judge themselves where the looks in the family went. But nonetheless, he's a terrific coach, and certainly we wish him well. And again, 3A Westmoreland County needs to represent, because I think we got some chance to make some good runs there in that classification. Let's now take a look at the 2A bracket, and this is another one that's 16 teams. So we'll run through. There's a lot of good action taking place here today in the first round. It begins with, no surprise, Sarah Catholic. What a great program that the baseball team has had over the years. They get the number 1 seed. They face number 16 Best Center, and it'll take place at Greater Latrobe High School today, 4 o'clock first pitch. Also on that side, number 8 Laurel against number 9 Shadyside Academy. It'll take place at North Allegheny. The winners will move on to the quarterfinals to be played on Thursday. Also on the left side of the bracket, Carmichael's number 4 seed against number 13 Apollo Ridge. That will be the second game to take place at Greater Latrobe High School, 6:30 start time in that one. And number 5 Riverside against number 12 Chartiers Houston. They'll be playing at Plum. On the right side of the bracket, the number 2 seed goes to the Seton LaSalle Rebels, and they will face number 15 Northgate. That will be at Shaler Area High School. Also on that side, Neshannock, the number 7 seed against number 10 Bentworth. They'll play at Chippewa Park. Number 3 Shenango against number 14 Fort Cherry. That's also at Chippewa. And number 6 Burgettstown at number 11 California. They'll play that one at WNJ. If you're paying attention, no Westmoreland County teams in the 2A field, so we're not going to spend much time. 4 teams will move on to the state playoffs in 2A. And last but not least, let's take a look at the bracket in 1A. It begins with the number 1 seed Eden Christian Academy getting a bye to the quarterfinals. They will face the winner of number 8 Greensburg Central Catholic and number 9 Leechburg. Centurions and Blue Devils will meet today, 4 o'clock at Plum High School. On the same side of the bracket, number 4 West Green against number 13 Western Beaver at Peterswood Park, and number 5 Our Lady of the Sacred Heart against number 12 Jefferson Morgan, also at Peterswood Park. I actually like when they do that, when the teams can kind of stick around and scout who they might see in the next round.
I'm sure those teams like it too.
Yep. If it makes sense, it certainly makes it easier for everyone involved. Other side of the bracket, number 2 Union gets a bye. The Scotties will play on Thursday against either number 7 Bishop Canevin or number 10 Riverview. The Raiders, a surprising championship appearance a year ago. That matchup will take place today at Shaler Area High School. Also on the right side of the bracket, number 3 Rochester gets a bye, and we'll await the winner of number 6 Wickley Academy and number 11 Avella. So we do have a Westmoreland County team. It's Greensburg Central Catholic. And I'll say this, GCC 7-3 in the section. It's maybe not the best version of the Centurions that we've seen, but usually they have a very good program. And I think the interesting thing with them is they entered the season, probably the top 2 pitchers talent-wise had injuries, couldn't go. But, they've found a way to win without those guys on the mound. They're still batting. And ultimately, I think if anything, if nothing else, it's created a lot of depth on that team.
Yeah, when you go and expect a couple of guys to kind of lead your team and they go down, I mean, I guess the silver lining is they basically played the entire season without them. So it certainly, helps knowing that they're, you can kind of coalesce and the team can come together. You have the rest of the season to do that. And as you said, maybe not a typical GCC team, 8-7 record, 7-3 mark in the section. They kind of struggled down the stretch with just one win in 5 or 6 games. So, it might not be that prototypical GCC team, but certainly it's a team that knows how to win in the playoffs, and they've been there and done that. And we'll see what happens against a Leechburg team that's pretty good. As a matter of fact, they actually knocked off Derry in the first game of the year. So we'll see how this kind of plays out.
Yeah, and so I don't know if this is confirmed or not, because again, we know baseball coaches, they're often tight-lipped. They don't like to, give out any secrets beforehand. But at least reading an article, it looks like there might be a chance one of those pitchers that we were talking about, Zach David, and that's a guy that we remember seeing him in the Teener League when he was 13 years old. He might be able to pitch in the playoffs, supposedly. So he's a guy that his bat is very prominent, but he's been sidelined with an injury. So if they get him back, you never know, because that's a guy that I think probably is the ace of that staff if he's fully healthy. So maybe a little magic. Now, again, it's tough because you play 2 games in 3 days. So even if you do get one really good pitching performance, you're going to have to go right back out there and play the number 1 seed Eden Christian Academy. But if any team can do it, GCC, they have a knack for some postseason success. So hope that the Centurions can make a run through the bracket in 1A. Just 3 teams, by the way, make it to the state playoffs. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but at least it feels like fewer teams go on to qualify for the states now than maybe some years past. Yeah,
and I mean, I don't know if it's because of the 6 classifications. I don't know if we're going back that far or not. I guess the 6 classifications I feel like has kind of watered down each classification, for lack of a better word there. But I think that in that same vein, it's giving teams that normally maybe wouldn't have a chance, a true opportunity to win a WPIAL championship. You go back to one of the first years, there were 6 classifications. You had Jeanette and Greensburg Central Catholic playing for a WPIAL championship. Never happened before. And GCC ended up winning. I believe it was in extra innings. I think Neil McDermott, our good friend who now is at Seton Hill, was pitching in that game. But so I think that I know this is kind of straying off, I guess, your question about teams getting to states, but you wonder if that had something to do with, the classifications and how many teams you have in each bracket. Now, it certainly has complicated things.
Yeah. And you know what? I think the best thing about the 6 classifications is that 6 teams get to say, we are WPIAL champions now. And you mentioned it. Well, how about Greater Latrobe? They won in 5A. Would they have won a title if there was the 4 classifications and they were playing against, let's just say, for instance, North Allegheny and teams that are much bigger? I don't know. But
yeah, I think looking at it from a Westmoreland County perspective, I feel like Hempfield and Norwin has kind of gotten it's been a lot tougher for them, I think, with the 6 classifications in all sports. I'm saying, with travel and everything. But there's been certain teams like a Jeanette's that played for a WPIAL baseball championship. Maybe Latrobe was helped out. I look at
Penn Trafford played for a title recently. Franklin Regional won it in 5A last year.
Yeah, and I even look at like a Dairy Football who had those, really, really good years there. It would have been a lot tougher for them to get the Heinz Field if there were only 4 classifications. So I think it's given, and as you mentioned, Franklin Regional getting to the WPIAL championship last year in baseball and winning it, of course, being able to do that. So, yeah, I mean, it gives more opportunities for more teams. But on the other side of that, I can see the issues with travel and those types of things. And it's also complicated things for, I guess, us knowing where, you used to know where every school was pretty much in every classification and really every sport. Yeah, there was some moving a little bit, but now it's just it's all over the place. So but it makes it, I don't know, it does make it kind of interesting. I can see both sides of it.
Well, one thing we talked about this yesterday on the softball show, it's like every year you can count on probably 2, 3, 4 Westmoreland County teams playing for titles and probably a couple of them winning it. I don't know that you can point to any baseball team and say that's a team that you can kind of pencil into a championship. But I think the good news is you go back almost every single year, and maybe I could have looked this up, but do you remember a year that there wasn't any Westmoreland County team playing for a title? Because it feels like almost every single year we mentioned GCC, Jeanette, Franklin Regional, Penn Trafford, Hempfield area. It seems like every year you got
Norwin.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, not in recent memory, not in the last handful of years or so. You're right. And Greensburg Central Catholic actually won one before, I forget what year it was, maybe 2014 or so. I think it was, I think it might've been before the 6 classifications when Colin Libertor was their number 1 pitcher. So, you even go back then. So yeah, I mean, in recent memory, there's always been a WPIAL, Westmoreland County team playing for WPIAL championship, but you're right, Sean. I mean, you look at this year, again, anything could happen. Any team could make a run, but you're looking at it, and I don't know that you can identify that one team that says, man, they really do have a shot. They are a favorite in their classification. That's not to say a team like Latrobe or Norwin or Hempfield, could get on a run, if any of these teams get hot, but that's why they play the games, I guess, my friend.
Yeah, and I do feel like, again, we did softball yesterday. It feels like at least sometimes that's a little bit more chalk, because if you have that one great pitcher that you are able to ride throughout the regular season, you can ride her through the playoffs. In baseball, it's more about you have to have the depth, and sometimes being a number 1 seed, that doesn't really mean anything. And I remember back to when I started broadcasting high school sports, Hempfield area was the number 1 seed. They lost to the number 16 seed Seneca Valley, who went on to win a championship. So truly baseball is a sport where the playoffs are, throw out the records for the regular season. They don't mean a whole heck of a lot.
And the other thing about baseball that's interesting too is a team may be, and you say about softball too, I suppose, but a team may not be up and down overall a great team, but they may have a stud pitcher, and all of a sudden, you get upset by a team. I remember Indiana a few years ago, and I can't remember the kid's name off the top of my head, had a really good pitcher. The team wasn't great, but they had a really good pitcher. And I don't know that they almost got an upset, I think, in the first round, despite being a pretty low seed. So, if your starting pitcher pitches really, really well, I mean, you can upset anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to thank the coaches who took the time to talk to us. Tim Buzzard for Hempfield area, Michael Ebdzinski for Norwin, Matt Basiano from Greater Latrobe, Dan Miller from Penn Trafford, as well as Craig Spizak from York and John Flickinger from Dairy area. Well, Flick, I know you always like to at least reach out and explain that we probably won't be doing any broadcasts over the next couple of weeks, maybe, but probably not likely. The hope is that we have a lot of teams that move on to the state playoffs and we kind of pick up from there.
Yeah, that's what the hope is. We've talked about this on our various shows that we have. Unfortunately, we do not have exclusive rights. There are exclusive rights for the broadcasts. We would love to continue doing what we do during the regular season and be there and broadcast Hempfield's first game, Derry's first game, Norwin York, but unfortunately, the WPIAL elects to award, another outlet with the exclusive rights. So we unfortunately will not be able to broadcast. If a team does get in the semifinals, there are some things that we can maybe do to try to do something like that. But as Sean mentioned, in the state playoffs, there is nothing like that. The PIAA does not have exclusive rights in terms of audio. So we would be able to do that. But, with the pandemic hitting and how popular video is now, it's actually complicated things for everybody a little bit more with trying to broadcast. It's unfortunate because all we want to do is highlight our kids and from our county and just do what we do, all year long. But unfortunately, we got to go through red tape in the playoffs. But we certainly would love everybody to keep checking our website, westmorelandsports.com. We'll have all of the scores, some as the games happen, on our website right at the top. You can also click on the scores page. We'll have scores updated. And you can also obviously follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook for more scores and more coverage throughout the playoffs.
Absolutely. And if things go well, and obviously this applies to softball as well, as we had our softball show yesterday, teams make it to the WPIAL championship. For the most part, if at all possible, we will be there providing coverage. So we'll be tweeting about it. We'll be having interviews with coaches and players, especially if they win. It makes it a little easier to do some of those post-game interviews. We'll have articles recapping it. So again, if our teams do well and make it to the championship, baseball or softball, we'll do our best. And I know there's a little bit of an overlap sometimes that you can't be everywhere at once, but we're going to try our best at Westmoreland Sports to cover all of that. Bring you all the action the best we can without actually doing the broadcast of those championships. So fingers crossed that happens and that we have a lot to talk about over the next handful of weeks for baseball and softball here in Westmoreland County.
And Sean, of course, just like we ended our softball preview with, I want to wish best of luck to the Seton Hill Griffins baseball team, who didn't make the PSAC tournament, but made the NCAA tournament because of how great of a season they had in terms of, not only conference games, but non-conference games, their strength of schedule. They went out and played a ton of games and they made it in. So they will start on Thursday at Westchester. They will play Slippery Rock in the sub-regional there. So good luck to Coach Maz and the Griffs.
Absolutely. Even a down year for them, they still are good enough to make it to the next.
Crazy.
They're able to move on to the regional. Well, again, thanks to all the coaches that we were able to talk to. Again, just because it's a jam-packed show, not able to talk to all of the Westmoreland County coaches, but we do thank the 6 that we're able to talk to. And for the next couple of weeks, westmorelandsports.com. Follow us on social media. We will fill you in on all the details of all of the games that take place across the baseball and softball playoffs. But for now, signing off from my colleague, Dan Flickinger, Sean Meyers, saying thank you so much for tuning in to our very special WPIAL baseball playoff preview show. It's been here on the Westmoreland Sports Network.
Enjoy the games, everybody.